Thank you and good morning. It is important to say thank you. Thank you very much to CND for putting this event on, and also to the many trade unions that have supported it. I'm going to be repeating certain things that have been said already, but I'm comfortable with that because we're talking about some massive issues, and I think it is worth reiterating those. In January this year, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock forward by a second. We currently sit at 89 seconds to midnight, the closest humanity has been to the end of the world. And political turmoil is, no doubt about it, a global issue. But looking at here at home, after a decade and a half of austerity that has immiserated communities all over the country, a pandemic that saw an explosion in wealth inequality, then a cost of living crisis which is still going, but has further exaggerated that inequality as the many in our society have become poorer. We now see disenfranchisement, we see disengagement, and we see an awful lot of despair. Austerity and the inevitable consequences that follow it have led to a rapid deterioration in living standards. The social fabric of our communities, the social fabric of our country has been ripped apart. And like 410 other Labour Party members, I was elected in 2024 on a manifesto of change and providing national renewal. The need to break away from the policies of the last 14 years was clear. We saw a combination of impotent politicians that allowed and even, let's be honest, encouraged capitalism to run riot, making political decisions that have led to this society that we see of gross inequality and ever-deepening poverty. The most obvious example being millions of people now relying on food banks to survive and warm spaces for heat. Frankly, incredible that that is life in the 6th largest economy in the world. Frustratingly, the quote-unquote change being offered has so far anyway not been transformative in its nature. While the pursuit of economic growth is of course laudable, how the government planned to achieve it, in all honesty, is not. In just over 3 weeks, I will sit in the House of Commons and listen to the budget. The choice facing the Chancellor is very, very clear: to tax the wealthiest in society and embark on a programme of redistributing wealth by investing in the public services that will combat poverty, or to continue along a very familiar path that will lead to deepening and growing inequality. I've said already many times in meetings and in the House of Commons, I completely reject the notion that austerity and the savage social consequences it has brought can be alleviated through more austerity. Because the argument that there is no money for public services and that it is an economic necessity for government departments to make more cuts is frankly ludicrous. Because there is money for nuclear bombs and weapons of mass destruction. And as already has been hinted at, it's fair to say that during my time as an MP in Parliament, I have been at odds with my own party somewhat on a lot of different issues. But one of the most worrying policy decisions is in the ideology that the route to improving people's living standards runs through militarism. At best, this is misguided, and at worst, it further jeopardises global safety. Fundamentally, the Prime Minister believes that by increasing defence spending, then we will drive economic growth and also, at the same time, keep us safe from perceived threats. Let's look at the first point. As Sophie said, does military expenditure actually grow our economy? To cite the global campaign on military spending, then the answer is no, not really. They say that military spending has one of the lowest employment multipliers of all economic categories, ranking 70th out of 100 in terms of the employment it generates. Energy, agriculture and food, chemicals, iron and steel, and construction have far greater employment multipliers than military spending. And as austerity has impacted communities in all 4 nations of the UK, when it comes to UK national renewal, then Ministry of Defence figures highlight that defence employment is densely concentrated in specific geographical regions of the country. Defence is neither a UK-wide industry, nor does it help small or medium-sized businesses, as they only secure 5% of orders. So, it does beg the question, if it's not workers or small and medium-sized businesses that benefit and prosper from increased military spending, then who does? Well, looking at the government's strategic defence review, the goal of making a UK defence industrial powerhouse, then, of course, it will be arms manufacturers. In Westminster, I hate to say it, but politicians from across the House are queuing up to extol the virtues of private capital as being the solution to improving people's living standards. But what politicians won't do is to tell the truth that the increase in military spending comes at the expense of funding the vital social needs the UK has after a decade and a half of this crippling austerity. The policies that have exaggerated existing inequalities, created new ones, impoverished communities, and caused hundreds of excess deaths. It's all about making political choices. To either build the hospitals that save lives, the schools that educate, upgrade infrastructure and invest in public services to improve living conditions, or do we go on a spending spree of tens of billions of pounds on military hardware, with those billions of pounds of expenditure inevitably flowing to private capital? The choice is clear: to build or to destroy. Things really are that black and white. Workers and communities, it's clear in my opinion, they need the former, not the latter. And as Sophie said, British military spending supports less than 1% of the UK workforce. So it won't be the working class that benefit from the so-called defence dividends. Of course it will be weapons manufacturers. With this drive to rearmament, arms manufacturers are being allowed an extraordinary influence in British policy making, decision taking and procurement. Arms manufacturers have embedded themselves in government and have done so and been allowed to do so for decades. And today, the most powerful and prominent politicians in the country are painting a horrendously bleak picture. The Chancellor warns that the world is changing. The Secretary of State for Defence warns that warfare is changing. The Prime Minister warns that Britain must become a battle-ready, armour-clad nation. This huge effort to convince the public that being on a perpetual war footing is not only necessary, but that it will keep us safe internationally, is Orwellian in the extreme. This rhetoric is not designed to keep us safe. Instead, it is a tactic to exploit fear, a tactic to promote private capital and imperial interests, proving that austerity is linked to capitalism, is linked to imperialism. And of course, domestic cuts to services and increased defence spending are, as we've heard already, inextricably linked to our foreign policy. British foreign policy is not formed, shaped, or even debated within the corridors of Whitehall. Neither does our foreign policy draw on the historic, morally just changes achieved through decades of decolonisation or the political gains achieved by the working class either domestically or abroad. Nor is it based on domestic or international struggles, campaigns or causes like CND or the civil rights movement. Just as domestic spending to improve living standards has been deemed less worthy compared to funding the arms trade, the decision to cut overseas development aid was portrayed as a direct choice between guaranteeing security and safety at home or helping some of the most impoverished people in the world, those living in the gravest of danger. That is not a foreign policy that this country should ever adopt. British foreign policy, and it's an inconvenient truth, but British foreign policy is to copy the United States. Trump has cut billions of dollars from American international development. The White House says the Trump administration will cut government spending that is woke, weaponized, and wasteful. $3 billion from US aid, $800 million from international peacekeeping operations, and more than $300 million to encourage democratic values and practices in other countries. All cut. By doing something similar and cutting our own overseas development aid, the UK is contributing to that growing global danger faced by the most vulnerable people in the world. And we further compound this by continuing to sell arms to nation states that abuse human rights. This is classic politics that divide people, that sows discord and disharmony, that creates division and a world that is dog eat dog, and the attitude is to hell with your neighbour. Not only is this immoral brand of politics the antithesis of the socialist tradition of internationalism, it is also a completely false economy. Because to choose rearmament over foreign aid and a domestic programme that will radically transform people's living standards, just so that corporations can make obscene profits and shareholders get their dividends, that will not make the UK a more equal country or society. Or will it make the world a safer place? Meaning, again, in January next year, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists will have to move the second hand again closer to midnight. Thank you very much for your time today. It's a pleasure to be here.